Hello my friends, welcome to a new video. When you start to look at sim racing, well, I think you may be a bit overwhelmed with all the hardware, software, platforms out there. So with this video, I will try to guide you a bit into the direction that you can take to start your journey on sim racing. The first choice that you have is the platform that you can use. At one hand you have the PC platform, at the other hand you have the console platform with PlayStation and Xbox. Both the platforms have their own strengths and weaknesses. When I look at consoles, well, they are very widespread. If you look at the households with kids in it, most of those households already have a console that they can play on. So it's very widespread. I also have to say that it's relatively cheap when you compare it to the PC platform, and it's also very hassle-free. I mean, you just plug in your steering wheel and your pedals and you can race in a matter of a minute or two. The PC on the other hand, well, it is more freedom that you have there, more freedom of hardware choice, more freedom of games, more freedom of settings, so a lot more freedom. But yeah, the downside of it is more expensive than console. If you look into buying a new computer, well, you know what the prices are these days. And in general, I think it is also more hassle. I had to get my PC ready for VR, for example, and I blew up my, I think my motherboard that I had to replace. Well, there is just a lot more to do with PC than with console. When we look at the games, well, you have two categories there in my opinion. You have more the competitive driving. I'm thinking iRacing, ACC, F1, Wreckfest, Forza Horizon, Test Drive Unlimited, games like that are more focused on the racing aspect of driving. And then at the other hand, you have more the leisure driving. I'm thinking about BeamNG, I'm thinking about ETS, ATS, I'm thinking about Taxi Simulator, which are more games that focus on the driving sensation itself, the chill of driving, rather than the competition, the racing aspect. I do have one remark for this. So a lot of the times when people bring up racing simulators and they talk about Gran Turismo 7, for example, they say, yeah, it's a simcade or something like that, and you have to buy PC for real racing. Don't listen to them. Gran Turismo 7 is a perfectly good game, very nice game. I have driven it quite some time already, and I really love it too. So don't let people push you from a console game, because GT7 is on PlayStation. Don't let them push you to PC. I mean, you can have a good time in Gran Turismo 7 also. Of course, you can perfectly play these games with a controller, but I think a steering wheel is a bit of a necessity when you drive racing games or driving games. There are two different types of steering wheels. You have those with an active force feedback, and you have those with a passive force feedback. Passive force feedback, for example, thrustmaster T80, and there, well, you have like the rubber bands that pull the steering wheel back to the center position, but it's not really driven by what you see or what you drive on in game. And on the other hand, the active force feedback, I'm thinking about thrustmaster T300, for example. There you really can feel what you are seeing on the screen. So when you go over a curb, you can feel that curb. And I think this is just a necessity these days if you go in a driving simulator, that you have a steering wheel with active force feedback. I would really not recommend taking a steering wheel with passive force feedback. If you look at the active force feedback steering wheels, well, there are three different types of transmission that you can encounter. One of them is the gear-driven wheelbases. I'm thinking about the Logitech G29, Logitech 923. Logitech is the only manufacturer that still sells those gear-driven wheelbases. And I have to say, I would really rule out this category to buy new. Buy it secondhand for a good price, but new, don't spend your money on these gear-driven wheelbases anymore. Second category would be belt-driven. We still have Thrustmaster, which uses belt-driven or which sells belt-driven wheelbases. Also sometimes hybrids with gear-driven. I'm thinking about the T248 of Thrustmaster, the T300, still being sold. So Those are wheelbases with the belt, and they are I would say a lot better than gear-driven wheelbases. They make a lot less noise, they are much more fluent, you don't feel the notches when you steer as much as you do with gear-driven wheelbases. So I really think that the minimum that you should go for when you buy a steering wheel would be a belt-driven wheelbase. T300, for example, is a very good way to start simulated driving. The last category for transmission would be direct drive. Now, direct drive, I think every company at this moment is having a direct drive, from Logitech to Simrig. They all have direct drives now. It is really the standard in the sim racing industry at this moment for wheelbases. When it comes to the price of the wheelbase, well, it goes from 180 euro to, well, the sky is the limit. And the price difference comes from a few different variables. The first one that I want to point out is the platform that you're using it on. For PlayStation platform and Xbox platform, they need to pay a license, and this license can be a very hefty part of the complete price. For PlayStation, it's the most expensive platform, and you will see that the prices, they can be 100 to 200 euro difference between a PlayStation a model and the equivalent model for PC, for example. Another thing would be, a very important thing, would be the force feedback that you feel, the number of details that you feel when you drive, or the force that it can generate is very important. Normally, when the more newton meters of force that you have on a wheelbase, the more expensive that it gets. The build quality is also something very much known by the people that buy a thrustmaster wheelbase. If you have a wheelbase made out of plastic and cheap materials, well, yeah, it is cheaper than if you have one made completely out of aluminium with a very nice rubber leather steering wheel on it. There's quite a big differences in the build quality too, which gives a big difference on price. Another thing would be the options that you have on the wheelbases. So, for example, does it come with a nice screen on it? Does it come with an extra button box on it? These are all a bit the differences that can have an effect on the price. A last thing that I want to point out would be the features of the wheelbase. So you might have already heard of True Force of Logitech or Full Force of Fanatec, a Harmony of Thrustmaster. Well, those are just extra protocols that come on top of the regular force feedback, and that can make a bit of a price difference possible. So is there a big difference between a 20 Newton meter base and an 8 Newton meter base? Of course there is. I mean, the amount of force that it generates, you really can feel it in the steering wheel. But the question that I want you to ask yourself, is this really necessary? I would recommend for most people 8 to 12 Newton meter. I think this is more than enough for most people, and that it can generate all the cars out there without any issue. If you look at karting, for example, that perhaps it needs a bit more force than a regular city car. But yeah, 20 Newton meter. What I mean is, don't buy too heavy wheelbases to start out with. Start with something a bit smaller. Like I say, 8 to 12 Newton meter. I think this is good for 85% of the people out there. I myself, I drive with Moza R9, which is 9 Newton meters. So I mean, more power doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you. Making recommendations of steering wheel is a bit hard, because they all have their different features, different price categories, different options. I mean, it's very hard. I don't know what kind of driver you are, if you like a strong force feedback, or if you like a lot of detail in your steering wheel. So that is also why I make the reviews. If I have to recommend a wheelbase for a starter, and I look at over all the platforms, I would say that a second-hand Thrustmaster TX or Thrustmaster T300 is really the way to go, or to start out with. It gives you already a very fine a very fine thought of how a sim racing can be. And from then on, you can see, okay, I need a bit more power, or I would love to have a bit extra feeling in the force feedback, like from True Force or something. But the T300 is really a good place to start. When you buy a wheelbase, you also want to buy a pedal base. They come in 2-pedal variant or 3-pedal variant. The main thing that you need to look for when you buy a pedal set is the configuration of the brake. You will probably have heard of load cell before. Now, load cell is a method of capturing the brake force. What it does is it captures the amount of force that you exert on the pedal and transforms it into a value of braking power. This is a bit different. Before, there was the potentiometers on the Logitech G29 pedals, for example, or the T3PA pedals of Thrustmaster. And what they did is they measured the distance that the pedal traveled. So not the amount of pressure that you put on it, but the distance. And this is a big difference. Your muscle memory, it can retain a lot better the amount of pressure that it needs to put on a pedal than it can with the distance that it needs to travel. To push in a pedal 3 centimeter, it is much more difficult than put 25 kilograms of force on a pedal. So that is something I would really recommend. Take a pedal with a brake, a load cell in it. This will really help out with braking. Another important aspect of the brake is how does it actually feel. When I was using the Logitech G29 pedals, I really had the feeling that it was a very linear pedal with a lot of travel on it. So you could push in from the start to the end with the same brake force, and it was not really that fun to drive with. There are, of course, other pedals that are a bit better, like the T3PM pedals of Thrustmaster. There you already have a spring, which makes it a bit more progressive towards the end because the spring is compacted, gets harder to push in. It can be replaced also with another spring, so I really like that configuration. You have the CSL pedals, for example, which use more of a foam as a stopper, so that it gets more compacted towards the end, and also it is more difficult to get to the maximum brake force. And then you have a combination of the two. You have springs and foams, like for example the Fanatec V3 pedals that I have here. I really like those pedals. They are very configurable, but they do still at maximum give a lot of travel when you push them in. I personally prefer the V3 pedals. I think those are the best pedals to suit me. But if you want to have a bit more of a GT3 feeling, well, you need to go in the direction more of P1000 pedals, or the LC100 pedals of Camus. So those are a bit firmer. They don't have that much travel, and for GT3 drivers I really think that is better. Again, here it is difficult to recommend pedals to a person without knowing what they exactly expect from it. So when it comes to pricing of the pedals, it's a bit the same. You can have them from €129, I think, for Thrustmaster T3PM pedals, to €1,500 for a pedal, an active pedal, then from Moza or Simrig. So it are the options also for the pedals that really dictate how much it costs. There are some simple extra options, like for example a 2-stage clutch, that you have like a bit a biting point in the clutch, is something that I really like. It's standard on the V3 pedals. Other options are, for example, rumblers on the pedals at the back of the faces, to make you feel a bit the road sentiment, and when you brake and slides and stuff like that, so that you can have as an option. Or you can go the active pedals, which are really a nice piece of technology, but in my opinion it's a bit overkill if you look at all the other features that you have available for pedals. My recommendation for pedals would be Thrustmaster TLCM pedals to start out with. You can have them for around €120 on the second-hand market, and they are yeah, decent pedals for build quality, but also configurability. They have a load cell, so they are already pretty nice pedals for a very soft price secondhand. New, yeah, that's the thing. I can't really recommend new because I don't know your budget, and it differs a bit from person to person. There are 4 different kinds of Simrigs. The first one and the most simple one is the wheel stand. The wheel stand is just something to attach your wheelbase and pedals to, and it comes between the desks and the desk chair. So it's very space efficient. I really like it a lot, especially the Next Level Racing Wheel Stand 2.0. It really was good because it was sturdy and it folded in also, was very space efficient. So that is the first one, wheel stand. I think very good solution for the people that live in apartments that don't have a lot of space available. So really a good choice. A second category would be the foldable Simrigs, and this one I really like a lot. Again, it is very space efficient, so can be used if you're in a race in a living room, fold it in, put it in the garage, and it's out of your way. With all the hardware attached to it, so a very good solution. An issue that I have with the foldable rigs is that in general they are not very sturdy. There is a lot of flex going on there, so that's, yeah, it's a bit give and take. They are not the most expensive either, but they are very expensive for what they are. You will see when you look at the prices. The foldable rig that I would recommend at this moment would be the GT Omega Sprint. It is the most stable one, the most configurable one at this moment that I make this video, so have a look at that one. When it comes to the third category, well, you have the tubular rigs, and this is a bit where it all started with the sim racing cockpits. The godfather of sim racing cockpits is without doubt the playseat evolution. Of course, these days it is a bit obsolete. I really wouldn't recommend buying it, even not secondhand. I think it is a bit yeah, it's not worth the money that they ask for it anymore. There are very much better alternatives these days. I'm thinking about the Playseat Trophy. I'm thinking about the Uplight GTR. Very good rigs. If you wanted to have a bit more stylish, you can go for the Trak Racer TRX. But of course, the price will go upwards if you go in a bit more style and a bit more sturdy. The positive points about tubular frames are they look stylish, they in general don't take up that much space, and yeah, well, they are reasonable sturdy also. And in the case of the Playseat Trophy, it is very light, so you can toss it around without any issue. The negative points for tubular frames in general is that the configuration of the wheelbase is not optimal. Most of the time they do not have a very good configuration vertical wise, so this means that the steering wheel can be a bit too high or a bit too low for your taste. You really need to see on the tubular frame what you can do to lower or make the wheelbase a bit higher. The fourth category is the extrusion profiles, and I think when you ask online, I need to buy a cockpit, what cockpit should I buy? 90% of the people will tell you buy an extrusion profile rig. Yes, I can understand, because the extrusion profile rig, it just gives you most configuration options possible. I mean, everything you can adjust much more than with the other categories, and that is just what you also want in sim racing, the perfect seating position. Well, extrusion rig is very good for this. The price of the extrusion rigs, they start from 300 for the TR40S of Trak Racer, and they go up to 1,000 1,500 euro depending on the options that you have on it. The negative points that I have with the extrusion profile rigs is that well, they are not as stylish as you have the tubular rigs. The companies are trying to put a bit more schwung into them, like making them a different color. Trak Racer TR120S, for example, is blue, fantastic. But yeah, in general, I would say that the design is a bit more boring. I would also have to say that you will need a lot, not a lot, but a bit more space than you have with tubular frames and with foldable rigs. This also can vary because I made my TR120S very small. But yeah, these are the two negative points that I really have for extrusion profiles. The last thing that I want to talk about today is the seat for your Simrig. You also have the choice here between GT style seats and more recliner style seats. Both of them have their advantages and disadvantages. If I look at the recliner seat, well, this is a bit more of my taste. You have a lot of configuration, you have standard seat rails on it most of the time, you have a backrest that you can incline a bit, and it just feels more comfortable to the bottom area and the back area. I really like this style of seat, but it does have the disadvantage that there is more flex on the back seat when you brake hard. So this is something that you need to take into account. Very comfortable, but immersion wise and sturdiness wise, this is the lesser option than the GT seat. GT seat, very sturdy. You can mount it really tight on the frame and it won't move. It is just more immersive than you have with a recliner seat. Of course, these seats also bring a significant cost to the entire Simrig. You will need to count around 300–400 euro for a good recliner or bucket seat out there. Of course, you also have the choice to just go to a junkyard and take a seat from an existing car. But the problem with that is that you might need to adapt the framework under it to fit on your Simrig, because it's not just 4 bolts and it is equal and you can put it on. No. Do some research for this, but this is also a possibility, and a cheaper possibility than when you would buy a seat from a known manufacturer for sim racing material. So some tips that I can give you, well, I would say first of all, buy secondhand. If you buy secondhand material, you always get more bang for buck than if you buy it new. And if you look out there, there are people after 2–3 months that stop sim racing because they don't have the time or whatever, and then you can buy this hardware for a nice discount, and it is practically new also. Another tip would be when you ask for advice on forums like on Facebook. If you ask, for example, what are the best pedals, the people will answer with the pedals that they have most of the time. So they don't have that much experience, but they know that they bought those pedals and for them those pedals are good, so they will recommend those pedals. Keep that into mind. A last tip would be to ask questions. I have the comment section in this video, which I will answer questions if they come to me. But it is just better to ask a question than to buy something and then find out later on that it's not really as you expected it to be. So I am aware that I did not cover everything already in sim racing. There's still so much to see, like the haptics that you can put on a Simrig, or the multifunction stalks that you have from the ecosystem from Moza. So there's so much things to still discover, but I would just advise you to first go with a normal steering wheel and pedals and see what you like, if you like it already, and then go from there on. Well, I hope you had something from this video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I will see you all next video. Bye bye.